in the blistering silence of the desert, where wind shapes dunes like drifting memories across endless sand, the pyramids rise as if the earth itself wished to speak. They do not explain their purpose with painted signs. They do not bend to the passage of centuries or to those who arrive seeking easy answers. They stand, patient and immovable, announcing a secret carried across thousands of years. A secret not of hidden machines or forgotten sciences beyond human reach, but of human longing, the longing to continue. The ancient Egyptians watched the sun vanish into the west each evening and return in the east each morning. They saw proof that existence can fall into darkness and still rise again. They believed that if the sun could conquer night, then death might be conquered too. From that belief, a question took shape. Could a human identity survive the silence beyond breath? Could memory outlast the body? Could a king who brought order to the living continue to protect the world in eternity? The pyramids are their answer. Long before the first block was cut from the quarry, a vision existed in the minds of priests, astronomers, and rulers. The pharaoh must not merely rule during life, he must guard the universe after death. His heart, once still, must keep creation balanced. His name must not fade from memory, for forgetting is the true end. If remembrance survives, life survives. So stone became remembrance. Architecture became immortality. The pyramids are not monuments to fear, they are monuments to courage. They show a civilization that looked at the unknown and refused to shrink away. Instead of surrendering to the inevitability of death, the Egyptians built structures that argue against endings. They created a pathway for the soul that does not collapse when the heart does. The walls of the pyramid are the spine of a belief that refuses to break. To make these gateways of eternity, the ancient Egyptians united observation and devotion. They studied the stars with the same commitment they offered to the gods. They learned how the night sky moves, how the seasons and floods follow predictable rhythms. They discovered that existence obeys laws that the human mind can understand. They built structures that embody those laws, turning the desert into a map of the heavens. Through engineering, they reached eternity. Through eternity, they strengthened life. Even now, in a world filled with machines that orbit planets and instruments that can see distant galaxies, the pyramids continue to inspire awe. Travelers stand before them and feel time dissolve. The pyramids offer the same question they have asked since the Age of Kings. What becomes of us after the final moment? What remains when the body surrenders its warmth? What force carries identity forward? One does not need to believe in gods to feel the gravity of that question. It is written into the human condition. Some search the pyramids for hidden technology or secret engines of power, because it seems impossible that ancient hands alone could raise such marvels. But the truth is more extraordinary. Humans built these mountains with strength and intelligence born from devotion. They aligned them with the stars not through guessing, but through generations of watching the sky. They carved their hope into limestone so that hope would become solid. They believed the soul must travel upward, so they built a monument that points upward still. The pyramids are not relics trapped in the past. They are messages sent to every future that dares to look upon them. They say that meaning is stronger than decay. They say that the desire to protect identity can shape the landscape of a continent. They say that the greatest mystery is not how they were built, but why. And the answer to that why reveals a civilization that understood humanity at its core. We fear endings. We resist disappearance. We search for continuity. The Egyptians transformed that search into architecture. They turned imagination into geometry. They designed a universe where death is a doorway and memory is an eternal flame. They believed that a king who served his people must never be lost to the darkness. He must rise. He must shine. He must exist where no beginning and no ending can reach. The sand may shift. Empires collapse like waves returning to the sea. Languages change and gods fall silent. But the pyramids remain. They face the stars with unshaken certainty. They remind us that humans once stood in a world filled with unknowns, and chose to confront those unknowns with brilliance rather than fear. When night softens the desert heat and starlight returns to the sky above Giza, the pyramids do not fade into the dark. They become part of it, they align with it, they listen to it, and in that quiet, their message becomes clear. There is no end, only a passage shaped by belief, a passage guarded by memory, a passage carved in stone. In the desert where life yields to silence, stone rises into the shape of a mountain made by human hands. At Giza and across the Nile Valley, pyramids stand as monuments to a belief that death is not an end, but a transition into a realm beyond ordinary sight. To the ancient people of Egypt, the pyramid was not merely a tomb. It was a carefully crafted vessel of resurrection, a structure built so that a king could step beyond mortality and join the eternal cycle of the cosmos. Every block, every angle, every hidden chamber served a single purpose: to give a divine ruler the means to die as a human and rise again as a star. The Egyptians believed that the sun set in the west into the lands of the dead. For them, geography itself was a map of the soul. Mansions of the living thrived on the east bank of the river, where the sun was reborn each dawn. Monuments to the dead rested on the west bank, where the sun disappeared each evening into darkness. The Great Pyramids of Giza stand firmly on that western side, facing the ribs of the desert as if watching the sun descend into its nightly journey. It was not coincidence, it was cosmic alignment turned into architecture. Pharaohs were not simply rulers, they were thought to be gods living on earth, sons of the sun, god Ra, destined to return to their celestial family once their earthly role was complete. Their death required a transformation, flesh into spirit, bound to earth into free within the sky. The pyramid gave them a path to ascend. It was shaped like the first mound of creation rising from the primeval waters at the beginning of time. From that mound, the first god, Atum, emerged. The pyramid mirrored this myth. Its sloping sides guided the spirit upward toward the heavens, a symbolic climb toward rebirth. The pyramid was a horizon in stone. The Egyptians had a word, Akhet, that meant the glowing place where earth meets sky, the very moment the sun rises or sets. The horizon was seen as a gateway to the unseen world where gods reside. When a king was buried beneath the massive limestone layers, he was placed at the threshold of this eternal horizon. The pyramid was a physical Akhet, a door at the boundary of life and death. To imagine how important this passage was, one must look into the beliefs of the soul in ancient Egypt. They saw a person as a union of different spiritual components. The Ba, a mobile personality able to travel beyond the body. The Ka, a life force that needed sustenance. The Ren, a name that kept identity alive. All of these needed protection. If the body decayed or the tomb was destroyed, the soul could not function. Immortality was fragile. The pyramid made it durable. Gigantic as they are, pyramids were born from a fear that memory can die. Stone was permanent. Stone resisted chaos. The ancient Egyptians had a word called Mat. It meant order and justice and balance. The opposite was Isfet, meaning chaos and destruction. Building a pyramid was not only a religious act, but a cosmic one. It declared that order would triumph over the sands and storms of time. It proved that a king who upheld Mat in life would rest within Mat in death. Workers who built these monuments were not slaves in chains, as popular stories might suggest. They were skilled labourers, engineers, mathematicians, quarrymen, and farmers who worked during flood seasons when fields were underwater and farming paused. The entire society contributed to the eternal home of their pharaoh. The king gave protection and prosperity. The people gave stone and labour. In return, they believed the king would intercede for them in the afterlife. His resurrection ensured theirs. Imagine the night sky that the Egyptians saw, far darker and richer than ours. The river mirrored the heavens. Stars burned with crisp clarity. A pharaoh buried deep within a pyramid was not isolated. He was placed on a cosmic launch platform. The narrow passages inside pointed toward certain stars. The pyramid was a spiritual machine, engineered so the king could join the imperishable lights of the northern sky or journey with the sun in its daily rebirth. Even at first glance, the form of a pyramid communicates ascent. Each tier is a step. Each angle is a gesture of rising. The core message is movement upward. Death was not a downward fall into a grave. It was a climb toward eternity. This belief shaped the architecture so thoroughly that the very stones act as words in a story told across millennia. The outside of the pyramid once shone like a second sun. Smooth casings of white limestone covered the rough core, polished to reflect light with such brilliance that a pyramid could be seen from miles across the desert. It glowed as if lit from within, not a symbol of decay, but of triumph. The king may have been dead inside, yet the monument proclaimed that he was more alive than ever, his presence blazing into the sky. Even the name of the Great Pyramid is telling. The ancient people called it Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, not the tomb of Khufu, not the memorial of Khufu, but his horizon, the place where he steps into the afterlife. To walk near these structures today is to feel their scale overpower the imagination, yet their purpose was intimate. They were built for a single person at a time, a king who carried the destiny of his people. Through him, the land remained in harmony with the gods. Through his resurrection, all creation continued to thrive. The pyramid was the guarantee that the cycles of sun and flood and harvest would endure. Every pyramid was a promise carved into stone, a promise that death could be defeated, a promise that a ruler would not fade. The pyramid was a reply to fear. What happens after life? Does the spirit wander? Does the night swallow identity? The Egyptians answered with confidence. There is a doorway. It is made of stone and mathematics. It faces the stars, and through it the king will rise. Deep within the mass of stone that rises into the sky, the architects of antiquity designed a hidden world where ritual and engineering meet. The outer form of the pyramid proclaims eternity to anyone who looks upon it, but the interior speaks directly to the soul of the king. This interior is not a maze without meaning. Every chamber and passage is placed with exact intention. Each architectural choice supports the spiritual journey that unfolds after death. At the center of this sacred geometry lies the chamber intended for the body of the pharaoh. Modern travelers call it the king's chamber. To the Egyptians, it was the house of transformation. The granite walls were quarried from far to the south and carried over land and water with determination that stretched across years. The chamber was built to last as long as the stars themselves. Granite is harder than the usual limestone used for the rest of the pyramid. It resists decay and symbolizes endurance. The king's mortal remains rested within a stone sarcophagus that was itself a kind of womb. The king would be reborn inside this quiet, dark room into a new, luminous existence. Above the king's chamber are multiple layers of narrow spaces, often called relieving chambers. Their purpose was physical and also symbolic. Physically, they reduce pressure from the millions of tons of stone above, preventing collapse. Symbolically, they act as barriers between the mortal and the cosmic. They allow the sacred heart of the pyramid to remain untouched by the weight of the world. Even here, engineering serves belief. A second mysterious chamber lies lower inside the pyramid. We call it the Queen's Chamber, although it was never intended for a queen. Its function remains debated among archaeologists. Some believe it represents the womb of the mother goddess who gives birth to the resurrected king. Others think it served as the home of the king's Ka, where offerings might nourish his life force. What is certain is that the chamber holds meaning beyond ordinary function. The Egyptians created space for the intangible forces that sustain existence beyond death. From both of these chambers, narrow shafts lead outward. They are small tunnels barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. Some extend all the way to the exterior of the pyramid, while others stop within the structure itself. They are not ventilation. They were aligned towards specific stars that the Egyptians believed were homes of gods. One shaft of the king's chamber points to the region of the sky associated with Orion, where the god Osiris rules. The other targets the area near the brightest star Sirius, which was linked to the goddess Isis. The shafts of the Queen's Chamber aim toward northern stars, which never set and therefore represent eternal spirits. Through these tunnels, the soul of the king could fly toward his divine destinations. To truly understand why these architectural features matter, one must explore the Egyptian concept of the ba. The ba is often shown in art as a human-headed bird. It represents individuality, personality, and the ability to move freely beyond the body after death. Yet the ba must still return to the body each night. In the pyramid, the ba would travel out through the star-aligned shafts, journey among the gods, then return to the mummy to regain strength. The pyramid was not a prison, it was a portal for repeated travel between realms. The ka, the life essence, demanded offerings of food and drink. Texts placed inside the tomb ensured that the king would never suffer hunger. Priests performed rituals for generations after burial. As long as his name was spoken and his pyramid maintained, the king's ka would be fed. The Egyptians believed that to speak the name of a person was to grant them life. The king's Ren, his eternal name, was carved into statues, walls, and objects so that it could not be forgotten. This intimate relationship between body, ba, ka, and Ren required absolute protection. If any link broke, immortality was in danger. The walls of the pyramid sealed off the interior to shield it from thieves and natural decay. Yet the design also allowed the soul to exit safely. This dual purpose reveals the genius of the builders. They built for spirits and for stone. Even the placement of chambers reflects cosmic order. The king's chamber is high within the pyramid, closer to the sky where the stars shine. The lower chamber, sometimes called the unfinished chamber, lies deep within the bedrock beneath the pyramid. It mirrors the underworld. Some scholars propose that the king's journey moves upward from the earth into the heavens. The architecture tells a myth in 3 dimensions. Imagine for a moment the funeral of a pharaoh. The coffin is moved through temples with hymns calling upon gods of protection. Priests recite spells meant to wake the ba and guide the ka. The procession crosses the Nile from the bright land of the living to the quiet land of the dead. The pyramid waits like a mountain of purpose. When the king is sealed within his chamber, the ritual does not end. It begins. From that moment, the king is no longer bound to time. His architecture becomes his body. His tomb becomes his doorway. Though massive, these inner chambers are silent. There is no decoration inside the Great Pyramid. Later pyramids would have walls covered in sacred writings known as pyramid texts. But in this older and grander monument, meaning is spoken through stone and alignment, rather than carved words. The absence of decoration is a statement of power. It says that the king does not need a painted map. The architecture itself is the path. In complete darkness, the king's transformation unfolds. The ba slips free and rises. The shafts guide its flight. The ka remains near the body, drawing sustenance from ritual. The Ren echoes in the prayers of living priests. The pharaoh, once a human ruler, becomes an eternal star. This was not metaphor to the builders. It was truth shaped into geometry. The continuing influence of these ideas would echo across centuries of Egyptian history. They developed more complex religious texts and more elaborate tombs, yet the core belief remained unchanged. The soul must ascend, the body must endure, the king must join the cosmos, and the pyramid remains the finest machine ever created to carry out that sacred purpose. Far above the burial chamber, the smooth white casing that once wrapped the Great Pyramid reflected sunlight so brightly that travelers described it as a second small sun resting upon the earth. When the morning light struck its peak, it seemed to merge with the rising sun on the horizon. This glowing moment was not a coincidence, it was a message. It said that the king who rested inside the mountain of stone was not gone. He stood at the very place where the sun is reborn each day. In life he ruled the land. In death he commanded the sky. Over time, wind and erosion stripped away the bright outer layer. What remains today is a rugged skeleton of blocks, the core of the structure. Yet even without its shining skin, the intention survives. The pyramid still points directly upward, a perfect declaration of hope made tangible. Its sides are aligned almost perfectly with the 4 cardinal directions, a feat of surveying and geometry that required careful measurement using stars and the path of the sun. The ancient architects understood that precision was power. If the pyramid was even slightly misaligned, its symbolic journey would falter. Perfection was not decoration. Perfection was salvation. Although our modern eyes often see the pyramids as remnants of a distant age, to the Egyptians they were active forces in the present. A pyramid was not silent after construction. It continued to work for the king every moment. The rituals performed in the surrounding temples fed the king's ka and maintained the bridge between mortal worshippers and the divine ruler. Festivals invoked his protection. Offerings kept his essence strong. As long as people remembered him, he continued to act. Forgetting was the true death. The pyramid was memory that could not be erased. Standing at the foot of such a monument today, one might feel small, yet that reaction is part of the design. The Egyptians wanted any visitor, ancient or modern, to understand the scale of kingship and eternity. The individual worker who hauled stones, the priest who recited sacred names, the farmer who offered grain, all shared in the belief that their labor helped hold the universe together. When they looked upon the pyramid, they saw their own hope for eternal life reflected in its massive presence. We often search for hidden technology when we study these structures. People imagine advanced machines, secret devices, or abilities beyond known science. But the true miracle is the human mind. With simple tools, but with profound determination and knowledge, the Egyptians assembled millions of blocks into shapes that defy time. They used ramps, levers, sleds, and teamwork. They tracked the stars with sighting rods. They recorded measurements with intuition refined by tradition. The result was not only a building, but a philosophy in stone, matter arranged to express meaning. It is easy to underestimate the level of organization required. Thousands of workers needed food, water, shelter, and management. Engineers planned the placement of each stone. Artists carved statues to accompany the king. Priests oversaw rituals so that every action carried symbolic weight. The construction of a pyramid was the greatest project a nation could undertake. It unified society, economy, and religion into one effort. The king promised order and abundance. The pyramid promised eternal partnership between ruler and people. Inside these stone mountains, the stillness is overwhelming, yet that stillness contains motion. The king does not lie idle. His journey to the afterlife is ongoing. Each night his bar soars through the shafts and joins the gods. Each dawn he returns as the sun rises. The pyramid embodies this cycle. It is a machine powered by belief. While the stone remains, the ritual continues. As centuries passed, some pyramids were robbed, some kings were forgotten, yet the earliest and most monumental pyramids at Giza remain. Their message is still legible. The Egyptians wanted us to see and understand that death can be conquered by memory and meaning. A life dedicated to harmony with the cosmos can achieve eternity. The king led the way, but the idea was meant for all. To look at a pyramid is to confront the deepest human question: what happens when our breaths stop? The Egyptians answered through architecture. They declared that existence does not fade into nothing. Instead, it moves into a realm where the stars are alive and the gods welcome those who prepare. The pyramid is not only a tomb or a mountain or a monument, it is a door made for a soul who refuses to end. When night falls upon Giza and the heat of the day dissolves into cool air, the pyramids appear darker than the sky itself. The stars hang above like guardians, unmoving and everlasting. In that quiet moment, one can almost believe what the ancient priests knew, that under those stones a king is ascending still, that every stone is a promise, that the journey never truly stops. Deep within the towering mass of the pyramid lies a world that few eyes have seen, a world intended not for the living, but for a single royal soul in need of safe passage. To step inside such a monument is to enter a space where stone becomes scripture and silence becomes instruction. The Egyptians believed that death was not a simple separation of body and soul. Instead, it was the beginning of a complex journey that required preparation, protection, and precision. Inside the pyramid, that journey was mapped with chambers and passages that worked together like organs in a living body. The pharaoh did not enter death alone. His ba, which is the part of the spirit that embodies personality and movement, could soar like a bird. Yet it needed to return to the body each night. His ka, which is the essence of life, remained tied to his physical form and needed nourishment. His ren, which is his name and identity, had to be spoken to continue. His shayut, which is his shadow, travelled with him. His ib, which is his heart, held memory and morality. The pyramid was designed to guard each of these aspects so that none would be lost in the darkness beyond breath. The king's chamber at the heart of the Great Pyramid is built from granite blocks brought from far to the south. They were hauled along the Nile and lifted into place with discipline that seems almost superhuman. The chamber feels both simple and eternal. Smooth walls of deep reddish stone reflect a faint sense of weight and purpose. In this room rested the body of the pharaoh inside a stone sarcophagus that has no lid today. The walls hold no decoration, yet the meaning is everywhere. The king is enclosed in a shield of the hardest rock that the builders could command. His mortal remains would endure as long as the stars endure. Above the king's chamber are several cavities arranged like stacked guardians. These so-called relieving spaces protect the chamber from the crushing burden of the pyramid above. The Egyptians understood forces and pressures through experience and tradition. They built these upper chambers so that the king's resting place would not collapse. Their engineering ensured that spiritual safety was supported by physical security. The king cannot rise to the sky if the body that anchors his identity is destroyed. Stone knowledge safeguarded eternal life. There is another chamber deeper within the structure that scholars call the Queen's Chamber. It was never meant for a queen. Its purpose is still debated. Some say it housed the king's car before ascension. Others believe it symbolized the womb of the goddess who would rebirth the king into the heavens. The room has a serene stillness. Its proportions are more delicate than the king's chamber. Two small shafts extend from its walls. They angle upward, but originally did not open to the outside. Their alignment hints that they were spiritual passages rather than ventilation. They point not to air, but to eternity. The unfinished chamber at the foundation of the pyramid lies rough and carved into the bedrock. It appears crude compared to the refined chambers above. Yet this lower chamber represents the earlier stage of the pharaoh's journey. It may symbolize the underworld, where the soul must confront darkness before transformation. The vertical shaft above it rises toward the king's chamber like a path from earth to sky. Body in the highest chamber, connection to the underworld below, passage through the middle. Myth and architecture merge. What makes these chambers extraordinary is not their size, but their meaning. The shape and placement of each space corresponds to spiritual function. The bar must escape each day and return each night. The car must remain secure and fed through ritual offerings. The wren must persist in prayers. The pyramid becomes a sanctuary for the complexity of the human soul as the Egyptians understood it. There is nothing casual within these stone corridors. Every element exists because eternity requires it. The journey of the pharaoh inside his new home was guided by ritual texts spoken during burial and remembered by priests outside. Torches that once flickered in these hallways illuminated more than stone. They illuminated belief. The air on the day of burial would have carried the scent of incense and the echoes of hymns. Yet once the final door was sealed and all living footsteps withdrew, no sound remained. From that moment, the pyramid belonged solely to the dead king and his invisible companions. As the living world continued outside the pyramid, the chambers within became the entire universe for the pharaoh. Here he waited for his bar to awaken. Here his heart would be weighed by the gods through spiritual trial. Here he would rise through the symbolic levels of existence from the deep underworld up to the place where the stars live forever. The chambers were like rungs on a ladder. His final goal was to reach the top of that ladder and become one of the imperishable stars in the northern sky that never set. For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife was not a dreamlike escape. It was a continuation of life in a perfected form. Work still needed to be done. Relationships endured. The king would rule from the sky just as he once ruled on earth. The chambers ensured that the transition into this new state of being unfolded correctly. Every wall reinforced destiny. Every surface carried purpose. To fail in burial was to fail in eternity. So the Egyptians built for success beyond time. To enter these chambers today, even through modern pathways blasted into the stone, is to feel the presence of minds that refuse to accept death as defeat. The stone holds silence, but the silence is not empty. It is watchful. It is waiting. In these confined spaces, the greatest ambition of a civilization was expressed with absolute seriousness. Here they laid a king to rise again. The deeper one travels into the pyramid, the more clearly the ancient intentions reveal themselves. What appears to be simple stone passageways become maps of a spiritual transformation that was thought to unfold over countless ages. The Egyptians saw the soul not as a single thing that drifted away from the body, but as multiple aspects that must be protected and guided. A pyramid without chambers would be only a symbol. A pyramid with chambers became a functioning vessel for the royal soul. Imagine the moment after burial, when the living have sealed the outer entrance and climbed away from the monument. Darkness returns. Silence becomes complete. Yet according to belief, this is the moment when everything begins. The bar stirs within the king's lifeless form. It remembers the prayers spoken outside. It recalls the alignment of the stars above. It rises and takes flight. The narrow shafts that seem impossible for a human to use are perfectly suited for the movement of spirit. They point toward the regions of the sky where Osiris and Isis live among the stars. Through these alignments, the bar finds its bearings in the cosmic night. The Egyptians watched the sky every evening and noticed that some stars never disappear below the horizon. These lights form a circle around the northern sky. They are called the imperishable ones because they never die. To join them was the greatest form of resurrection. The shafts that rise from the Queen's chamber aim at those stars. This chamber may have served as the place where the bar first ascends before continuing to the higher level of the King's chamber. It is a preparatory space, a chamber of becoming. In the King's chamber, the bar reunites with the body at dawn to regain strength. The ka, which remains with the body, continues to rely on the rituals of offering performed by priests in the temples outside. Even though the priests stand under the open sky and not within the pyramid, their actions reach the ka through the solidity of the structure itself. The pyramid is a bridge of substance. It connects the inner world of the dead king with the outer world of the living. The ka cannot survive without this connection. The soul that starves loses its power and identity. Farther below the unfinished chamber represents the place where trials are faced. The Egyptians believed that the heart-ib of each person would be weighed by the gods. A heart filled with wrongdoing would outweigh the sacred feather of Ma, at which is the principle of order. The soul of the guilty would be destroyed. The king, however, was expected to pass this judgment. He upheld Ma'at in life, therefore he would pass into eternal harmony after death. The unfinished chamber may symbolize this stage of peril. It is rough against the polished perfection above. One must rise from uncertainty into divine certainty. The architecture, therefore, expresses a story in 3 dimensions: descent into darkness and unformed earth, ascent into a chamber of preparation, final rise into the chamber of triumph, where the king awaits his journey to the stars. The pyramid is a staircase shaped into the most enduring form known. It declares that the physical world and spiritual world are not separate. They are linked through design. These chambers also demonstrate an understanding of forces and precision that did not come from guesswork. Each block was placed so that weight would push downward into strong sections of the structure. Air spaces above the king's chamber prevent crushing weight from destroying the sacred room below. The ancient builders balanced gravity and faith with astonishing mastery. When modern engineers examine these details, they find solutions to architectural problems that did not need modern mathematics to be successful. Human observation and long tradition supplied the knowledge. The exact orientation of the chambers also speaks to an awareness of geography and orientation. True north is found more accurately through the stars than through any tool made of wood or metal in that era. The Egyptians observed the night sky through generations until they understood where the axis of the heavens turned. They aligned the entire pyramid to this invisible line. They believed that the northern stars were the final home of the king, so the heart of the pyramid points to that sacred destination. Like a compass of stone, it guides the journey. Inside the chambers, no images or writing interrupts the smooth surfaces of the walls. Later pyramids and tombs would have texts carved everywhere, but the earliest Great Pyramid expresses its story silently. The symbolism lies in the shape, not in language. Silence is its scripture. A pharaoh of immense power needed no written message on his walls. His monument spoke for him. The ceiling of the king's chamber is formed from massive granite blocks placed side by side. Above them, layers of other blocks create a sloping internal roof that deflects pressure. Those who have studied the chamber carefully notice that the proportions of the room and the placement of the sarcophagus inspire a sense of stillness. Every angle seems to hold breath. The space feels timeless. That effect was likely intentional. The chamber is the chamber of eternity. Time has no permission to act here. As one stands in the darkness of these hidden spaces today, the imagination can almost follow the bar as it ascends through the shafts to touch the stars. It can almost sense the car dwelling near the stone coffin waiting for the next offering. The Egyptians did not hope vaguely for survival. They believed they had built the precise technology of immortality. The pyramid was not faith alone, it was faith made solid and exact. To walk these corridors today is to witness a philosophy built with muscle and stone. It tells us that ancient Egypt did not separate science and religion. They joined them. The structure is proof. Engineering ensures the survival of the physical form. Symbolism ensures the journey of the soul. Without both, the pharaoh's future cannot unfold. These chambers were never meant for crowds. They exist for one king at a time, yet through him the entire nation sought a guarantee that their world would remain in balance. Because if the king achieves eternal life, then the harmony of the land continues. That belief motivated the immense effort needed to build such a place. Every block placed in the pyramid is a statement of confidence that life can triumph over death. The chambers inside the pyramid therefore hold a message for all who dare to understand. They say that existence can be secured through understanding the cosmos and oneself. They say that death is not the end if preparation is made with care and reverence. They remind us that the ancient Egyptians valued life so greatly that they constructed the greatest tombs in history to protect it beyond the grave. The more we explore these chambers, the more we recognize that the ancient Egyptians designed the interior of a pyramid as a living environment for a soul that continues to act. The king did not sleep in stillness for eternity. He moved, he judged, he protected. His existence after death was not passive, it was a new stage of kingship, and the architecture that surrounded him allowed his existence to unfold without interruption. The priests outside the pyramid played an essential role in this ongoing life. They entered nearby temples at dawn to recite the sacred offering formulas that nourished the Ka. They spoke the king's wren so that his name continued to vibrate in the world of the living. They kept his memory active because memory was life. In Egyptian belief, to be remembered is to exist. To be forgotten is to vanish. The pyramid ensured that forgetting would never occur. Its massive presence forces even strangers in distant ages to ask who lies within. Curiosity becomes remembrance. Remembrance becomes resurrection. It is important to understand that although the Great Pyramid appears undecorated inside, this silence arrived only after decisions were made about how best to express permanence. In later pyramids and tombs, texts and scenes were inscribed to guide the dead. But inside the Great Pyramid, meaning is carried by shape and alignment alone. The Egyptians trusted their cosmic geometry. They believed that stone could speak more clearly than words if placed with absolute intention. The transition from life to afterlife was believed to require rituals and trials that took place within these inner spaces. The pyramid was not only a protective shell, but also a stage where the king's spirit confronted transformation. The Egyptians imagined that the deceased king must learn how to navigate the celestial realms. He must recognize the gods and be acknowledged by them. He must know the names of guardians who block the way. He must demonstrate that he upheld Ma'at, the sacred balance, during his life. Only then could he reach the circumpolar stars that rule forever in the night sky. When priests locked the final stone door behind the burial party, they were not abandoning the king, they were sending him into action. From that moment, the king became responsible for maintaining cosmic harmony. If he succeeded, the Nile would continue to flood at the right time, bringing life to the land. The sun would rise each morning with strength. Harvests would flourish. War would be avoided. The stability of the kingdom depended not only on the living king, but on the dead one who rose out of death to rule from the sky. Inside the pyramid, the king's bar confronts two extreme environments: complete darkness and absolute stillness. These conditions were not accidental. Darkness removes distraction. Stillness asserts control over sound and time. The king is alone with his eternal responsibility. The stone around him has no gesture of movement. All action comes from the spirit. This contrast reminds the soul that its new life is not physical. The body is only an anchor. The true power now belongs to the invisible parts of the self. The Egyptians saw the body as sacred not because it was beautiful, but because it was the house of the soul. Without preservation, the bar and ka could not survive. That is why the Egyptians developed mummification. They learned to remove the organs that decay quickly. They treated the skin with natron salt to dry it thoroughly. They wrapped the body in linen bandages coated with resins. The purpose was durability. The mummy was not a lifeless corpse. It was the support structure for eternal life. The chambers inside the pyramid protected the mummy so that the bar and ka would always know where to return. If we imagine what the pharaoh's spirit experienced inside these chambers, we can picture a journey of ascension. First, the king remains close to the body. He learns to separate his bar from his physical shape. Then he travels into the shafts that point toward the realm of Osiris. Osiris was once a king who died and returned as ruler of the afterlife. He is proof that resurrection is possible. To join Osiris is to achieve victory over death. The shafts act as guides for the bar so that it does not become lost in the vast sky. At the same time, the car remains grounded in the king's chamber. It receives power from the prayers outside. It ensures that the king's sense of purpose remains unbroken. The car does not travel far. It is loyal to the body. It protects identity. It feeds the spirit with continuity. Both bar and car must succeed together. Separation without return results in destruction. The Egyptians built these chambers as a place where these two halves of existence could cooperate forever. The queen chamber, though smaller and less robust than the main chamber, stands as a testament to the Egyptians' attention to every stage of the soul. If the car needed a sanctuary, or the bar needed a chamber for its earliest ascents, this room provided that environment. It is like a waiting place or a threshold. From here, the soul moves forward, or perhaps from here, the soul becomes aware of its own immortality. When we step into this room today, we can feel its difference. It is quiet in a different way than the king's chamber. It feels expectant. It feels like an inhale before a great transformation. The lower chamber carved into bedrock lies, like the earliest memory of Earth. It reminds the king that even gods require the embrace of the land before they rise. It stabilizes the whole story of the soul by rooting it in the physical world. Without a foundation, the structure cannot stand. Without acknowledgement of the underworld, the king cannot truly ascend. The Egyptians believed that all creation emerged from darkness. Therefore, a journey back through darkness confirms and restores the cycle. These chambers do not simply preserve the king. They express the deepest confidence of an entire civilization. The Egyptians believed in cycles, night into day, flood into fertile soil, seed into grain, death into life. The pyramid chambers reflect that cycle. Each space participates in rebirth. Each wall affirms continuation. Even now, scientists use advanced tools to understand what lies inside these structures. Muon scanning reveals hidden voids that may have played roles in the sacred architecture. Yet what we discover only strengthens the truth that the ancient builders knew precisely what they were doing. They were not guessing. They built solutions for a future they could not see but fully believed in. When we stand within the heart of a pyramid, we witness a conversation between human fear and human hope. Fear that death will erase us. Hope that meaning survives. The Egyptians turned that hope into architecture. They created chambers where the greatest of their people could remain powerful forever. And through the king, they believed that everyone might share the blessing of continued existence. The chambers for the pharaoh's soul therefore remind us that ancient Egypt poured its genius into understanding how to endure. They built, not for centuries, but for eternity. They believed the soul deserves a home that does not crumble. They achieved that, and the chambers still stand holding silence that speaks a message older than recorded history. The king lives, the king rises, the king endures. When night blankets the desert and the wind settles into stillness, the pyramids of Giza no longer seem like monuments of stone. They appear like instruments tuned to the heavens. Their immense shapes cut a perfect geometry against the glittering sky. The ancient Egyptians believed that the stars were not distant suns as we know today, but divine realms where gods lived forever. For a king to achieve eternal life, he must join those eternal lights. So the pyramid was built as a pathway, a cosmic staircase, and a celestial machine designed to perfectly connect Earth to sky. Long before the first stones were set, astronomer priests studied the motion of the heavens with devoted patience. They watched how stars rose and set. They noticed that certain stars in the northern sky never descend below the horizon. These stars circle the sky endlessly, unbothered by night or season. To the Egyptians, these were the imperishable ones, the very spirits of gods who never die. The king who joined these stars would share their immortality. That desire shaped the alignment of the pyramids. The Great Pyramid faces the four cardinal directions with precision that astonishes modern engineers. Its west side faces the land of the dead where the sun sets. Its east side faces the land of the living where the sun is born each morning. Its northern and southern faces align with the stars that governed eternity. Achieving such perfection required careful observation. The Egyptians tracked the positions of stars over many nights using simple yet ingenious tools. They used a straight rod and a fixed sight line to mark where stars in the northern sky traced their circles. They waited until two stars crossed directly overhead at the same moment. That invisible line guided their orientation. No compass existed at the time. The sky itself was the architect. Inside the pyramid, star shafts extend upward from the chambers like hidden telescopes. They do not serve for air, they serve for spirit. One of the shafts from the king's chamber points toward the region of the sky that includes Orion. Orion represented Osiris, the god of resurrection and lord of the afterlife. Osiris was believed to have once ruled the earth as a great king, then died, then risen again to rule forever in the sky. The pharaoh hoped to follow that same path. Through the shaft aligned with Orion, his bar could soar straight to Osiris, joining the god who had conquered death. The other shaft from the king's chamber aims toward the brightest star in the night sky, which we call Sirius. The ancient Egyptians called it Sopdet, and they linked it to the goddess Isis, who restored Osiris to life. When Sirius rose in the dawn sky each year, it marked the return of the Nile flood that renewed the land. A star that brought life to a whole country could certainly bring life to a king. That shaft is the way for the pharaoh to reunite with the goddess who grants rebirth. The shafts from the queen's chamber aim toward different realms of the sky. One points toward the imperishable northern stars. The other seems aligned with regions that represented spiritual transformation. The Queen Chamber appears to serve as a place where the soul prepares for ascension, and the shafts provide orientation so that the bar does not wander lost in infinite darkness. The Egyptians saw the sky not as chaos but as a map. They knew where gods lived, and they built instructions into the pyramid so that the king could follow that map. During certain nights in the deep past, the constellation we call Orion rose in a position over the southern horizon that aligned directly with the descending angle of the star shafts. Modern measurements confirm that the geometry of the interior matches the sky as it appeared thousands of years ago. The builders did not guess. They calculated. They waited for the heavenly clock to match their blueprint. Only then did they seal the stones in place. The pyramid and the cosmos spoke the same language. To the Egyptians, every star was a soul. Noble ones sparkled brighter. A king's destiny was to rise into that realm and join the divine order forever. His living body ruled on earth. His resurrected form would rule in the sky. The pyramid was the guarantee that this transformation would be accurate. No part of the journey could go wrong. If the bar could not find the correct star, resurrection might fail. So astronomy became sacred, observation became ritual, measurements became prayer. The Egyptians named the Milky Way the Great River in the sky. They believed it was the celestial version of the Nile. Just as the Nile nourished life on earth, the Star River nourished souls in the afterlife. The shafts leading outward created the connection between the two rivers. During burial rituals, priests spoke words that identified the king with the rising sun and the unfailing stars. They believed those words activated the architecture. The stones did not merely stand there, they opened. The pyramid was a horizon made of stone. This idea is preserved in the Egyptian name of the Great Pyramid, which can be translated as the horizon of Khufu. The horizon is the place where the sun crosses between worlds. When the sun descends, it enters the realm of the dead. When it rises, it returns to the realm of the living. The king placed within his horizon pyramid would travel with the sun in this eternal cycle. His resurrection was as certain as sunrise. Even the angle of the pyramid's sides carries a message. The slope is gentle enough to resemble the rays of sunlight that reach the ground. In Egyptian art, the rays of the sun are often shown as slanted lines that carry divine power. The pyramid sides are those rays made solid. They channel energy from the sky downward to the chambers within. At the same time, they guide the bar upward to the heavens. The building is a bridge in both directions. Matter and spirit meet along those planes. To modern minds, the idea that stone structures can facilitate a spiritual voyage may sound symbolic, but to the ancient Egyptians this was practical engineering. They saw no boundary between physics and religion. The stars were as real as the ground beneath their feet. The gods were as real as the stones of their buildings. The universe was alive. It spoke in predictable patterns, and understanding those patterns offered survival beyond death. Even today, astronomers marvel at the precision of Giza. The base length of the Great Pyramid varies by only a few centimeters, despite its vast scale. Its orientation differs from true north by only a fraction of a degree. Such accuracy proves that the ancient builders were masters of measurement. They did not require modern clocks or lenses. They watched the sky. They listened to the night. They remembered what they saw across generations. In the desert silence, the stars tell a story. The Egyptians learned every chapter. Then they wrote their continuation into stone. The pyramids stand as proof that human beings can reach for eternity with intellect and devotion. They show that a civilization can construct a map to the stars, not with paper, but with blocks of limestone and granite. At night, the old monuments seem almost to awaken. They do not glow with reflected light any longer, because the polished casing stones that once wrapped them have been removed. Yet their shapes remain exact, their message remains visible. They still point to the heavens with absolute confidence. They still whisper the purpose for which they were raised. The king was not buried, he was launched. The ancient builders did not look upward in idle wonder. They studied the sky as if their very survival depended on its order. To them, the heavens were a living scroll. Every constellation was a message. Every rising and setting of a bright star was a sign that time and destiny remained in balance. The pharaoh, who carried the weight of maintaining cosmic harmony, needed to join that balance when he left the world of breath. The pyramid and its alignments transformed the pharaoh into a participant in the ongoing rhythm of creation. Orion rising over the southern desert was more than a spectacle. It was the image of Osiris rising from death. When the king died, his bar was meant to follow that example. The path was inscribed into the stone through the narrow shafts. In daylight, the bar prepared for its nightly flight. At night, it soared into the sky to join Osiris and learn eternal kingship. The Egyptians saw this not as metaphor, but as literal transformation. The sky above Egypt was a realm of gods and rulers who continued their work forever. Sirius rising just before dawn announced the arrival of the annual flood that renewed the fields. The goddess associated with Sirius was the bringer of life and water. The shaft that pointed toward her star was a promise that she would continue to nourish the king even after death. Her power was a cycle: flood, harvest, remembrance, rebirth. The pharaoh entered that cycle through stars and stone. The pyramid's connection to the northern sky also reveals a deeper message. The Egyptians understood that the northern stars never fall below the horizon. They live beyond decay and beyond the reach of darkness. They do not vanish. That eternal persistence made them symbols of the forever existing spirits of the dead who were declared justified. When the king joined those imperishable stars, his existence became unstoppable. His rule lasted for all time. The alignment of the pyramid with those stars was a guarantee written in geometry. To modern researchers, these alignments prove extraordinary skill. The Egyptians created sighting methods based on the crossing points of stars. They used simple tools such as a lintel piece of wood with a string to create a straight line. They observed a star on one side of the night, then on the opposite side later, marking both points. The midpoint between those marks gave them true north. Once that direction was set, they built the entire pyramid around it with unwavering precision. Even the layout of the pyramids on the Giza plateau speaks to celestial intention. Some scholars have suggested that the three largest pyramids resemble the belt stars of Orion placed upon the Earth. Others argue this is a coincidence or an interpretation shaped by desire rather than evidence. What is certain is that every structure in the necropolis communicates with the sky in some measured way. The Egyptians did not choose positions at random. They believed that the ground was sacred only if the sky agreed. During important rituals, priests stood outside and raised their arms toward the heavens. They invoked the stars by name and called upon them to guide the king. The Egyptians gave names to the constellations that reflected their own myths. Some represented animals, others represented boats. Still others carried divine figures. The night sky was not a blank canvas. It was the illustrated map of destiny. Every priest who looked upward saw the future written in starlight. Inside the pyramid, this celestial connection becomes intensely practical. In total darkness, the bar must navigate without confusion. The shafts are narrow, but they are correct. They point to the stars that carry meaning for resurrection. If the soul can orient itself in the infinite expanse of the night, then it can survive. The shafts ensure direction. Without them, the bar might wander, losing identity and failing to return. The Egyptians knew how easy it is to become lost in darkness. They refused to allow their king to drift without guidance. There is another layer to this alignment between stone and sky. The pyramids stand on the west bank of the Nile. This location aligns them with sunset, which symbolized death, yet they face the east where the sun will rise again. Each side of the pyramid witnesses a different part of the daily resurrection of the sun. The king rests at the heart of that exchange. He is held between death and life, just as the sun is held at sunset and sunrise. The alignment makes the pharaoh's resurrection as reliable as the cycle of the sun. This design continues the oldest Egyptian mythology about the primeval mound that emerged from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time. That first mound was where the sun rose for the first time and creation began. The pyramid repeats the shape of that mound. Each sunrise therefore reaffirms creation. Each pyramid therefore becomes a reenactment of creation. The king buried inside rises not only as an individual spirit, but as a renewal of the entire world. That idea explains why pyramids are placed in rows or clusters. Together they form a sacred landscape that mirrors cosmic order. Each king in his own pyramid contributes to the stability of the heavens. The Egyptians saw the universe as fragile. If the rituals failed, or if the king did not ascend, then the sun might not rise. The Nile might not flood, the stars might stray from their places. Eternal life for the king was the foundation of life for everyone else. Even now, thousands of years later, the pyramids still point to the same heavens. The slow wobble of the Earth over many centuries means that the stars have shifted slightly from their positions. Yet the stone alignment remains one of the greatest astronomical achievements in human history. These monuments are silent astronomers who never cease watching the sky. We can imagine the ancient priests standing among them in the quiet of a warm night. They traced invisible lines across the dark vault. They whispered the names of the stars. They spoke to the immortal beings who dwelled above, and they knew that their king was on his way to join them. The pyramids remind us that the desire to reach beyond death is as old as civilization. They show that human beings have always looked upward for meaning. They reveal that those who built them believed in a future where life continues among the stars. The architecture is a union of earth and sky, of daily life and eternal promise. These colossal structures do not only rise to the heavens, they bring the heavens down to meet us. In the darkest hours of night, the sky arches over the desert like an ocean made of fire. The pyramids stand beneath that ocean as anchors that tie the world of humans to the world of gods. To the ancient Egyptians, the stars were not distant and unreachable. They were destinations, they were homes, they were the future. When a pharaoh died, his journey aimed not for burial, but for reunion with the lights that never fade. The priests who served the king were not only guardians of ritual, they were astronomers who measured time through the movement of constellations. They noted the rising of Sirius just before dawn, which signaled the coming flood that renewed agriculture. They watched Orion climb the night sky, which recalled the story of Osiris resurrected. They recognized patterns that repeated season after season. In those patterns, they found evidence that the universe was stable and that life could continue. This reliability gave them confidence that the king too could return from death, just as the sun returns every morning after disappearing beneath the western horizon. The shafts inside the Great Pyramid are remnants of a spiritual technology that operated through observation and intention. They are angled in ways that reveal no accidental placement. One shaft aims toward the region where Osiris rules among the stars. Another aims toward the place of eternal nourishment provided by Isis. Two more shafts point toward the undying northern sky, where no star sinks into oblivion. Each direction offers a different form of immortality. The pyramid therefore supports multiple routes to eternity. The king would not rely on one path alone. His bar has options, his rebirth is ensured. When the bar flew into the sky, it was believed to shine among the gods. The Egyptians sometimes called stars ancestral spirits who had completed the journey of existence. The pharaoh would join that community. He would no longer be a single point of life. He would become a point of light. From the heavens, he would watch over the earth and ensure that the rules of balance and order continue. Life on earth depended on the success of that journey. If the pharaoh failed, chaos would rise. Some interpretations of the pyramids suggest that they form a picture of the original mound of creation that rises upward in a gentle slope. Others focus on the idea that the pyramids are like rays of sunlight solidified into stone. Both interpretations carry truth. The pyramids represent emergence and radiance. They represent the first moment of creation and the ongoing power of the sun. Their geometry channels those forces. In Egyptian belief, shaping the world in the image of creation reinforced that creation continually. The pyramids were part of a vast network of structures that worked together to ensure eternal life for the king. Valley temples near the river received the body first. Causeways led up toward the plateau where mortuary temples stood before the pyramids. Priests performed rites in those temples to activate the power of the stone adjacent to them. The architecture formed a single system that guided the pharaoh from living ruler to celestial ruler. Nothing was isolated. Everything communicated through the language of orientation and alignment. Even the choice of the west bank of the Nile was a message. The sun falls in the west. Death falls like the sun. The pyramids rise from that place of falling light to declare that death is only the midpoint. The sun will rise again in the east. The king will rise again among the stars. The construction site becomes a symbol of transition. The pyramid is the hinge between realms. Night after night, generation after generation, people would see the pyramids standing against the starlit sky. They would see Orion and Sirius, and the northern stars remain constant. They would understand that their king was up there, participating in the celestial cycle that keeps life flowing. Their faith did not rest on imagination alone. It was confirmed every evening when the familiar constellations took their places. As long as the stars followed their paths, the king was alive. Modern scientists who use advanced instruments to study these alignments grow increasingly impressed by the accuracy achieved with simple tools and careful attention. The builders did not need metal telescopes or electric equipment. They had patience, they had memory, they had reverence. They watched, they learned, they built, and the result endures with minimal error across thousands of years. Some people today seek mysteries beyond the grandeur of what already exists. They imagine hidden energy beams and secret technologies. Yet the true marvel is the knowledge that created these alignments. The ancient Egyptians used observation of the natural world to solve their greatest fear. They created a structure that speaks to both logic and longing. They united engineering with eternity. Standing before these pyramids today, under the same stars that guided their creators, one can feel the continuity of thought. Human beings still look upward for answers. We still study the night sky to understand our place in the universe. We still wonder what happens after life ends. The Egyptians did more than wonder. They acted. They created monuments that do not let the question fade. They shaped the desert into a story that tells us that death cannot erase what is built with purpose. The Great Pyramid remains the most compelling testament to the idea that the journey of the soul is written into the fabric of the cosmos. Its stones face the directions of destiny. Its passages lead to realms of gods. Its presence tells us that the king did not surrender to death. He followed a map. He ascended on wings made of belief and calculation. And so the pyramid becomes a star anchor. It holds the heavens and the earth together. It declares that a single life may rise beyond breath and join the eternal dance above. The king's journey is a promise that the stars we see today are not strangers. They may be the eyes of those who once walked the ground beneath our feet. In the centuries after the Great Pyramid rose from the desert floor, a transformation occurred within the heart of Egyptian belief. The pyramids remained the great ladders of ascension, their stone geometry aligned with the eternal heavens, but a new element was added to strengthen the journey of the soul. Words, once spoken only by priests and carried only through ritual memory, began to be carved into the very walls of the burial chambers. These were not simple inscriptions or decorative symbols. They were spells, instructions and commands that the king would use to navigate the most dangerous passage imaginable. The Egyptians understood that the afterlife was complex and full of challenges. To overcome those challenges, the king would need knowledge. Knowledge became power, and power was written in stone. These writings are known today as the pyramid texts, and they represent the oldest religious writings ever carved by human hands. They appear first in the pyramid of King Unas at the end of the 5th dynasty, several generations after Khufu and his great monument at Giza. The walls of the burial chamber in Unas pyramid are covered with hundreds of lines of sacred speech. Each line is a key designed to unlock a stage in the king's resurrection. Each spell acts as a bridge that must be crossed to reach eternity. The Egyptians carved their faith into the walls because they believed that the written word had presence. A word engraved becomes eternal. A spoken prayer might fade, but a carved one never stops speaking. The pyramid texts speak directly to the king. They give him the vocabulary of the heavens. They tell him the names of gods and guardians he will meet on his climb toward the stars. They instruct his bar to fly correctly and not wander into confusion. They remind his car to remain nourished and alert. They protect his wren, his name, from being erased by the forces that seek to dissolve identity. These words serve as companions and guides. They are the voice of the living carved into the architecture of the dead. The Egyptians believed that the universe originated through the power of divine speech. Creation itself was spoken into existence. The gods called the world into being with words that carried the energy of order. If speech could make life begin, then speech could make life continue after death. The pyramid texts draw from that same creative force. They tell the king to rise as a star. They command the heavens to accept him. They speak as if they already know the future, and in doing so, they make that future real. Inside the pyramids that contain these writings, the burial chamber becomes a courtroom of gods, a temple of rebirth and a school of cosmic navigation. The walls no longer remain silent as they do in Khufu's ancient monument. They now shimmer with the language of the afterlife. The carved signs are hieroglyphs, images that embody both meaning and existence. A carved falcon is not only the symbol for a god, it is a manifestation of that god. When the king reads or hears the text, the divine being is present. Words are beings. Writing is action. The pyramid texts often describe the king rising like the sun. They call him the heir of the gods. They speak of light breaking the darkness and breathing returning to the breathless. Some spells tell the king how to avoid the dangers that lurk in the shadows of the underworld. Other spells instruct the gods to welcome him without hesitation. Each line is a form of preparation. If a question is asked of the king by a celestial guardian, the answer is ready on the wall. If a door must be opened, the formula is at hand. The king may be dead in body, but through these words he is alive in intellect and identity. There is no concept of randomness in this world. Every spell has its place. The arrangement of the text on the walls is deliberate. It maps the order of resurrection. The walls that surround the king's sarcophagus speak protection from every direction. On the east wall, spells address the rising sun and the renewal of life. On the west wall, they speak of the setting sun and the embrace of the ancestors. The north wall guides the king to the imperishable stars. The south wall opens paths to Osiris and the hidden gods of transformation. The chamber becomes a compass of eternity. Even as the pyramid texts changed the interior design of pyramids, the overall purpose of the architecture remained the same. The king must ascend, but writing provided a safety net. The builders understood that stone can protect a body. Only knowledge can protect a soul. If the king forgets the right words or is confused by the vastness of the afterlife, the writing speaks for him. The spells are not merely instructions. They are a part of his identity. They ensure that the king always remembers who he is. A pharaoh cannot afford amnesia beyond death. Forgetting is destruction, so the walls remember for him. The texts often describe the pharaoh's transformation into a star. They speak of the king becoming a falcon of gold who rises into the heavens. They tell him to sit among the gods and receive offerings of light. In these lines, death is never seen as an ending. It is a climb, a transition from one state of being into another more powerful state. The pharaoh becomes eternal not because his body endures, but because his spirit knows the correct path. The pyramid texts are that path written clearly and permanently. The creation of these texts also reveals the evolution of belief. The earlier pyramids relied fully on architecture to carry meaning. The placement of chambers, the alignment of shafts, the angle of the sides, all serve spiritual function. But as centuries passed, religious understanding deepened. The Egyptians came to believe that language itself held cosmic stature. By merging writing with architecture, they created a multi-layered defense against oblivion. If the geometry faltered, the spells would still succeed. If the rituals outside were forgotten, the walls still prayed. What makes these texts extraordinary is the sheer confidence that radiates from them. There is no doubt, no hesitation. They declare that the king will rise. They command gods with the same authority that gods once commanded creation. In these writings, the king becomes a being of pure order, destined to keep the stars in their places and keep the sun on its path. Eternity is not granted to him, it is expected of him. Through these writings, we gain a deeper understanding of the Egyptian view of existence. They saw no separation between matter and spirit. Architecture, ritual, speech, and memory were intertwined. The pyramid texts are part of a system, a great machine of resurrection that spans earth and sky. Nothing is left to chance because chance has no place in a universe built on balance. When modern scholars translate the spells, they find poetry that speaks across time. They see visions of the sky opening, of the dead king rising to embrace his divine fathers, of cosmic rivers and celestial boats that carry souls across eternity. These are not stories told for comfort. They are plans of action. The Egyptians believed that when these words were spoken and when they were carved, they became real. The future described by the text was not uncertain. It was predetermined through divine law. These texts also remind us that literacy in ancient Egypt was not ordinary. The ability to write and read hieroglyphs was a sacred skill reserved for the elite scribes and priests. Knowledge was rare, yet its rarity made it powerful. To carve words into the pyramid was to bind the king to that power forever. Even after the voices of the priests fell silent, the walls continued to chant. The texts do not sleep. They are as active today as the moment they were carved. The pyramid texts mark a turning point in the history of religious thought. They show that humans recognize the power of language to challenge death. They show that belief can become architecture, and that architecture can become a tool of salvation. The pyramids are silent from the outside, but inside they speak in the voice of eternity. Every line carved into those walls is a step the king takes toward the stars. Every spell is a promise that his soul will not fall. Beneath the ground, in the heart of a monument that touches the sky, words become wings. In the stillness of those chambers, the king is never alone. He is surrounded by the voice of his people and the memory of his reign. The texts assure him that his kingdom continues, that his name survives, that his role as protector of order remains unbroken. Through written words, the Egyptians ensured that their greatest rulers always knew the way home. A pyramid is a symbol that never whispers. It does not ask for attention, it commands it. Rising from the desert like a statement carved into the horizon, it announces power that refuses to fade. To the ancient Egyptians, power was not simply the authority to rule during a lifetime. True power was the ability to continue shaping the world after death. The Pharaoh was the center of the universe on Earth, and the pyramid was the instrument that made him the center of the universe forever. It fused politics and cosmic belief into a single structure. Every stone laid upon another proclaimed that the king was not merely mortal. He was the force that kept both society and the cosmos balanced. The Egyptians believed that the king upheld the principle called Ma'at. Ma'at was the foundation of existence, the order that kept chaos from devouring creation. As long as the king was righteous and strong, the land prospered. The Nile flooded with perfect timing. Harvests grew in wealth. Enemies kept their distance. When a pharaoh died, his power should not vanish. If his power fell into silence, Ma'at itself might collapse. That fear drove the construction of pyramids. By giving the king eternal presence, the pyramids gave eternal stability to Egypt. Architecture became government. Construction became continuity. Faith in stone guarded faith in society. The massive scale of the pyramids was not excess. It was necessity. A small tomb could be forgotten. A modest monument could crumble. But a mountain of carved blocks towering above the desert floor would stand as a reminder that the pharaoh's authority was absolute. It told every living citizen that their ruler had conquered death. It told every rival that power stronger than time itself defended the kingdom. The pyramid did not only care for the soul of one king, it intimidated doubt. It ensured loyalty. It shaped belief by shaping the land. Even the workforce that built the pyramids reflected royal might. Thousands of laborers from across Egypt served in rotating crews, fed and housed by the state. They were not forced by chains, but by duty and pride. Their participation linked them to the king's eternal fate. Their sweat became their offering. Their effort became their pathway into the king's protection. The pyramid was a communal national project, strengthening unity through shared purpose. Every stone carried not just weight, but identity. To build the pharaoh's eternal home was to build Egypt itself. The logistics required for pyramid construction reveal an advanced state that few civilizations had reached. Officials tracked deliveries of stone. Managers directed teams of quarrymen, masons, and haulers. Priests supervised rituals that infused every task with sacred meaning. The coordination of so many workers for so many years demanded organization at a scale that proved kingship had real power. The pyramid, while created for the afterlife, was a political message for the present. It demonstrated that a ruler who could command millions of tons of stone could certainly command the fate of his people. The appearance of a finished pyramid reinforced that message daily. Sunlight striking the polished limestone casing made the monument shine like a beacon. From a distance, the Great Pyramid would have seemed to hover on the horizon, a giant triangle of light calling attention from everywhere. Villagers and travelers would see it rise above the desert and feel the undeniable presence of authority. Kingship became visible, tangible, and immortal. Even those who never saw the pharaoh in person witnessed his power every time they looked toward Giza. The pyramids also marked the pharaoh's dominance over the forces of nature. Stone is the oldest and most durable material found upon the earth. To take that stone, cut it precisely, and raise it into a perfect form was to show mastery over the physical world. The king who commanded such transformation demonstrated his divine connection. Nature obeyed him, matter obeyed him, even eternity obeyed him. The pyramid is the pharaoh's claim that the universe itself recognizes his rule. This monumental architecture communicated political strength beyond borders. Foreign envoys and traders who traveled to Egypt could not help but be astonished by the sheer magnitude of the pyramids. These were not works of a fragile nation. They were the announcement of an empire rooted in absolute confidence. Any adversary who saw the pyramids would question the wisdom of challenging a people capable of building mountains. The pyramid also served as a message sent through time. The pharaoh asserted that future generations must remember him, must respect his authority even long after his heart had stopped beating. That memory preserved his power. For the Egyptians believed that forgetting is a second death, one far worse than the first. The pyramid fought against that threat. It refused to allow the king to disappear into the sands of history. Every traveler who asked who built these monuments contributed to the pharaoh's survival. Stone became propaganda. Memory became loyalty across centuries. Inside the pyramid, the political purpose continued through the preservation of the king's body and identity. His mummy was not a corpse, but a symbol of the nation's eternal leader. His car and bar required safety so they could continue ruling from the sky. The kingdom was not complete without the king's rebirth. His resurrection ensured Egypt's future, not only spiritually but socially. The people believed that the king acted as their advocate in the realm of the gods. If the king remained strong beyond death, the land remained strong. If the king faltered, chaos would return. The grandeur of the pyramids therefore justified the king's rule. Only a divine being could command such effort. Only a divine being deserved such a home. The architecture confirmed that the pharaoh was chosen by the gods. Belief strengthened construction. Construction strengthened belief. The pyramid and the kingship became one. The stone was his throne carved into the earth itself. Even now, the pyramids continue to project that ancient message. Visitors from around the world stand before them and feel awe. They are reminded that a single life once influenced an entire civilization so profoundly that millions of stones were elevated in its honor. The pharaoh's ambition still speaks. His presence still shapes imagination. Though dynasties have vanished and languages have changed, the pyramid has not surrendered its authority. It still rises unbeaten against the desert sky. Power the Egyptians understood, must live longer than the person who wields it. A ruler who prepares only for his lifetime rules only a moment. A ruler who prepares for the ages becomes eternal. The pyramids embody that truth. They show what humanity can achieve when belief and leadership combine into a single unstoppable force. They are the Pharaoh's final decree. They are his declaration that he matters, not only today, but forever. In the shadow of those ancient stones, it becomes clear that pyramids were more than tombs and more than temples. They were monuments of immortality, crafted to ensure that the pharaoh's power would never collapse. Built with purpose, they ensured that death could not silence a king whose rule was woven into the fabric of the universe. And as long as those pyramids stand, his power endures. The ancient Egyptians believed that eternity demanded precision. A soul could not wander blindly into the afterlife. It needed structure, guidance, and protection. Just as the cosmos followed the laws of balance and order, known as Ma'at, the architecture that carried a king into the realm of the gods needed to reflect those same cosmic laws. Engineering was not separate from spirituality. It was spirituality made visible. Every measurement, every alignment, every stone was a prayer built into physical reality. To construct a pyramid was to shape a mountain out of intention. Millions of blocks were carved from quarries and hauled across the land with ropes and sledges. Workers poured water on the sand ahead of sled runners to reduce friction. Observing the world around them, they discovered subtle truths. Wet sand holds together. Wet sand allows heavy loads to glide easier. Engineering arose from careful attention to nature. The Egyptians did not need metal engines or gears. They needed knowledge and patience. The selection of stone was itself an act of purpose. Limestone was chosen for the outer casing because it could reflect sunlight and illuminate the horizon with a brilliance that no natural hill could achieve. Granite was quarried from far to the south and used deep inside the structure where strength was needed most. The Egyptians understood that the core required endurance while the skin needed radiance. The pyramid was both body and soul. The body must be sturdy and the soul must shine. Material choice carried meaning. Ramps, the great unanswered puzzle of pyramid construction, were designed with creativity that adapted to circumstance. Some were straight, some spiraled, some were built from mud brick and limestone rubble, dismantled once their purpose was fulfilled. The Egyptians did not cling to a single method. They adjusted strategies depending on height, angle, and terrain. The goal was constant. The path to achieve it evolved. This flexibility shows a depth of engineering thought, often underestimated by modern imagination. The precision achieved in the Great Pyramid is extraordinary. Each side measures so close to equal length that the difference is less than a measure that can be counted on fingers. The corners align with the cardinal directions so precisely that even with modern tools, that accomplishment demands admiration. How did they do this? They observed the stars. They followed the movement of the shadow cast by a vertical rod. They found the exact place where shadow and sunlight spoke truth. They used nature as their instrument of measurement. The universe itself helped them draw the lines. Inside the pyramid, the engineering becomes even more astonishing. The king's chamber sits at the heart of the structure, supported by layers of granite blocks that form a shield against collapse. Above the ceiling, 5 separate cavities relieve the pressure that would otherwise crush the chamber beneath millions of tons of stone. The Egyptians learned these principles long before physics textbooks existed. They learned by building, by observing, by remembering. Knowledge passed from master to apprentice for generations became wisdom that outlasted empires. Ventilation was not the purpose of the shafts that rise from the chambers, yet they serve an engineering function as well as a symbolic one. They create small channels that relieve tiny amounts of stress and allow the structure to adapt to temperature changes without cracking. The Egyptians knew that heat expands stone. They created breathing space within the solid heart of the monument. Life requires breath. So does eternity. The surface of the original pyramid, now worn away by time, once glimmered like a celestial beacon. Polished limestone blocks reflected the sun brightly, making the pyramid appear as though it were carved from light itself. This was not a vain flourish. Light is life. Light is rebirth. The reflections connected the king with the radiant cycle of the sun. Engineering served theology. Theology guided engineering. There was no separation. Even the way stones were laid holds meaning. The joints between blocks were tight and angled so that pressure moved downward evenly. This allowed the pyramid to resist earthquakes and sandstorms. The builders turned nature into an ally rather than an adversary. They respected the desert and listened to it. The design responded to wind, weight, and time with serene confidence. The Egyptians also engineered security into the structure. The passageways leading to the burial chamber were built with trap stones that could be lowered to seal the corridor after burial. Hidden openings and deceiving angles confused would-be intruders. The king wore both crown and armor in death. Robbers who tried to violate the tomb faced obstacles designed to protect the rest of the kingdom. The pharaoh's body was more than personal remains. It was the anchor for the nation's destiny. One of the most remarkable engineering achievements is the exact leveling of the pyramid base. Despite its vast size, the foundation remains almost perfectly flat. The Egyptians achieved this by flooding the foundation trenches with water and marking the level at which the surface just touched. Water always seeks its own level. The earth itself provided the tool. The builders simply listened. The pyramid was constructed with a unity of purpose that joined artisans, laborers, priests, and administrators. Each person contributed to eternity. The workers lived in nearby villages built to support them with food, shelter, and medical care. When bones of those who labored were uncovered in modern times, evidence of healed injuries showed that injured workers were treated with compassion rather than discarded. The society honored those who worked for the pharaoh's everlasting life. Service to eternity brought dignity. As the pyramid grew taller, it grew closer to the heavens. Each new layer was a step toward the realm, where stars rule the night. The workers could see the monument rise day after day, a visible testament to their shared belief. The more the structure took shape, the more their faith hardened into confidence. They were not only building a tomb, they were building certainty that death could be defeated. When the last stone was placed at the summit, the pyramid became complete in its cosmic purpose. It formed a perfect triangle that meets the sky above. It established a line of connection from the king's remains to the stars. It became a mirror of creation. Under that final stone, countless hands rested, knowing that they had helped secure the fate of their world. To understand the genius behind these pyramids is to recognize that engineering and belief advanced together. The Egyptians did not build blindly in service to superstition. They reasoned, they tested, they corrected mistakes and refined methods. Their spirituality demanded excellence, and excellence created technology. The pyramid is what happens when a civilization refuses to separate the physical from the divine. Modern science continues to study these monuments. Investigations using cosmic particles called muons have revealed a large hidden void inside the Great Pyramid, a space untouched since the time it was built. Other unexplored cavities may exist still. The more we learn, the more we understand that the Egyptians engineered their structures with knowledge that we are only beginning to appreciate fully. They left mysteries to remind us that eternity cannot be measured entirely by human insight. The pyramid stands not only as a home for a king, but as evidence that ancient minds mastered both spirit and stone. The Egyptians built vessels of resurrection with such mastery that the vessels themselves achieved a form of eternity. They remain upright, while nations have risen and fallen like desert winds. They remain meaningful while languages and gods have changed. They remain guardians of belief and proof of human will. To walk in their shadow is to feel the presence of minds who believed that life itself could obey the laws of geometry. It is to feel that hope can be shaped into blocks and placed upon one another until it touches the sky. The pyramids are not ruins. They are functioning machines of immortality, and engineering is the engine that keeps them alive. For thousands of years, the pyramids have stood under the open sky, silent yet filled with questions. The outside of these monuments has been measured and studied, every angle inspected, every stone counted in wonder. Yet the greatest surprises do not stand on the surface. They wait within. The Egyptians designed their pyramids to hold mysteries that would challenge anyone who tried to understand them too quickly. Some chambers were built to be walked through only once during the burial of a king. Other chambers were built to be sealed forever. Even today, with tools created long after the age of stone, we are still discovering spaces that no living person has ever entered. The ancient builders understood secrecy as well as they understood engineering. They carved corridors that rise and fall without warning. They placed false doorways that lead to solid rock. They created hidden rooms that fade into the thickness of the pyramid. Imagine standing inside the narrow ascending corridor while it was still new. Torches flicker. The walls seem to breathe as shadows move across the limestone. The air is heavy with ritual. Every inch of the structure feels alive with intention. The king will be placed in his chamber, and then the passages will be sealed with granite blocks dropped into place forever. The dead must journey onward alone. The living must not return. For centuries, explorers believed that the known chambers inside the Great Pyramid were all that existed. The king's chamber, the queen's chamber, the rough chamber carved into the bedrock below, and the connecting passages were thought to reveal the entire story. Yet Egyptian architecture always hides more than it reveals. Scholars suspected that additional spaces might lie undiscovered within the structure, perhaps used for ritual preparation or symbolic guardianship. Still, without forcing destruction upon the pyramid, there was no way to see what waited behind unbroken walls. Then modern science brought a new kind of eye. Instead of chisels and crowbars, researchers used particles that fall from space. High above the Earth, cosmic rays strike the upper atmosphere and create muons, which are tiny particles that can pass through stone. By placing detectors inside and around the pyramid, scientists can measure how many muons make it through. Fewer particles mean more dense stone. More particles mean empty space. This method became a silent light that could pass through darkness without disturbing even a grain of sand. The results were astonishing. Inside the Great Pyramid, high above the Grand Gallery, the detectors revealed a region that does not match the expected solid architecture. It is a void, a large empty space with a volume similar to that of the Grand Gallery itself. This space had remained hidden since the age of the pharaohs. The builders knew of it, they shaped it, they sealed it. Yet for thousands of years no human soul has entered it. Modern researchers call it the Large Void. To the ancient Egyptians, it may have been part of a spiritual design that scholars have yet to interpret fully. This discovery does not suggest supernatural technology. It does not imply machines of other worlds or portals to distant galaxies. Instead, it reveals the mastery of ancient architects who built with layers of purpose. The void might lighten the weight, pressing upon internal passages. It might mirror the Grand Gallery to symbolically balance the structure. It might serve as a chamber where ritual took place before burial. The mystery lies not in fantasy, but in understanding ancient intention. To assume magic is to underestimate the Egyptians. Their genius does not need imagination to grow larger. It is already vast. At the entrance to the Great Pyramid, another hidden space was discovered recently. Beneath the stones near the original doorway lies a long, sealed corridor. Muon studies and small robotic cameras revealed a passage untouched since antiquity. Its function remains debated. Perhaps it was a ceremonial entrance meant only for divine eyes. Perhaps it was part of complex security designed to protect the king's resting place. The Egyptians often built unseen features to guard what mattered most. What remains sealed often speaks the loudest. When people hear of hidden chambers, some rush to suggest that the pyramids contain unknown energies or advanced machines disguised as tombs. But the truth is far more inspiring. The pyramids are advanced because they express human intellect, lifted by profound belief. Every unknown space promises not a science-fictional device, but a deeper understanding of how a civilization faced death with confidence. A hidden chamber may hold objects placed with precise symbolic meaning. It may hold nothing at all because the emptiness itself carries meaning. Absence can be deliberate. Silence can be sacred. Consider the Grand Gallery, a long passage that rises steeply toward the king's chamber. Its high, corbelled ceiling creates an otherworldly feeling. Running along the sides are niches that once held beams for lowering or lifting heavy slabs. Such engineering reveals physical purpose, yet the grand scale and upward direction reveal spiritual purpose. It is a corridor of ascension. One can imagine the funeral procession hauling the stone sarcophagus up this passage with ropes, the sound of chanting echoing beneath the soaring ceiling. The king's journey to eternity begins with an upward climb made by the living. Near the intersection of the ascending corridor and the Grand Gallery, granite-blocking stones remain in place as ancient guardians. Beyond them, the smooth hallway tightens into the passage leading to the king's chamber. This narrowing reflects a final purification. A king who rules a nation must be seen by all, but a king who enters eternity walks alone. The structure teaches transition, wide to narrow, earth to sky, many to one. Far below, the unfinished chamber carved into bedrock stands as a reminder that the pyramid is built upon earth itself. The Egyptians believed the first land of creation emerged from limitless water. The roughness of the lower chamber connects the king to origin. From origin he rises, from silence he speaks, from stillness he acts. The upper void discovered above may represent the opposite: air rather than stone, lightness rather than weight, potential rather than memory. Together, top and bottom bind creation, and ascension within one structure. The existence of hidden chambers shows that the Egyptians thought in layers far greater than simple burial design. They created spaces that only gods would use. They made architecture that worked invisibly. They ensured that millennia later, the pyramid would still surprise anyone who dared to explore it. They did not build to amaze the present. They built to astonish the future. If another chamber waits inside the Great Pyramid or any other pyramid, it is not a place to find treasures of gold. It is a place to understand belief. The treasures that once filled tombs have mostly been removed by time and theft. What remains untouched are the ideas in stone. The Egyptians placed their faith into geometry and alignment. They trusted architecture to deliver immortality. A secret room inside a pyramid is not a hiding place, but a declaration that the greatest truths are often concealed until humanity is prepared to recognize them. Some mysteries will remain hidden forever, and that is not a failure of science. It is a triumph of design. The Egyptians intended their pyramids to guard secrets, not reveal them. Those who open every door risk unraveling the meaning carefully woven into the fabric of the monument. A pyramid without mystery becomes only a pile of blocks. Its power is diminished when its silence is broken. Yet silence does not forbid curiosity. It invites patience. The more we discover about the hidden chambers of Giza, the more we appreciate the unity of mind and spirit that created them. We see that the Egyptians were not naive dreamers, but rational thinkers who understood physics, astronomy, and material science to a remarkable degree. They used their knowledge not to dominate nature, but to join it. Within the darkness of secret spaces, the Pharaoh continues his journey. The architecture protects him, the stars guide him, the texts speak for him, the engineering sustains him, the hidden chambers complete him. The pyramid is a world that exists so that the king may move into a world beyond. As our instruments peer deeper into these ancient structures, we must remember the voice of the builders. They did not create portals to other planets or technologies unknown to science. They created monuments that allow memory to walk across eternity. The hidden voids are the breaths of immortality. They are the places where stone becomes thought and darkness becomes meaning. They are proof that the Egyptians mastered not only what is seen, but also what is unseen. Across every continent and through every age, humans have built monuments that challenge the finality of death. Some raise tombs of earth, some construct temples of wood, some carve sanctuaries into mountains, and some, like the Egyptians, shape stone into the very form of creation. The pyramid is not unique in its purpose. It is unique in its ambition. It stands as a doorway between the realms of the living and the realms that lie beyond. Such monuments reveal a truth older than history. Human beings fear the end of their story, so they build places where the story is required to continue. In the mind of an ancient Egyptian, death was not emptiness. It was a passage into a world that existed alongside the familiar one. That journey demanded preparation. A king who united the land and upheld Maat could not simply vanish the moment his heart stopped beating. His power had to travel with him. His identity had to remain intact. The people believed that if their ruler survived death, then they too could hope for survival. The pyramid therefore became a gateway not only for the pharaoh but for the civilization that depended on him. It was a promise cast into stone that life does not collapse into silence. Every culture finds a way to face mortality. The people of ancient Mesopotamia built ziggurats that stretched upward like stairways to the divine. The Maya created steep pyramids that acted as platforms where kings could join the gods in ritual ascent. The Chinese buried their first emperor with an army of terracotta soldiers to defend him forever. In these different forms, the same idea echoes. To survive the unknown, we build bridges across it. To confront death, we create monuments that deny its finality. A gateway serves multiple roles. It protects what lies within and separates it from what lies without. It frames an entrance and guards an exit. It carries symbolic weight, even when it remains physically sealed. The Egyptians understood this deeply. They designed their pyramids as the boundary point between two states of existence. They believed that when the king entered his pyramid, he stepped into the architecture of transformation. The stone walls erased the weakness of flesh. They taught him how to rise as a star. Human beings shape gateways when they cannot bear the thought that love ends or that memory fades. A gateway insists that existence continues. The Egyptians watched the sun rise every morning after sinking into darkness each night. They saw a truthful metaphor written across the sky. If the sun can die and return, why not a king? If the sun can cross the boundary between worlds, why not a soul? The horizon became the greatest symbol of passage. The pyramid, called the horizon of the king, became the physical horizon that does not move as the sun does, but remains forever ready to guide resurrection. Even the act of building a pyramid forged community in the face of mortality. Every stone hauled upward affirmed belief. Every worker who shaped the limestone became a part of the king's eternal home. When those workers looked upon the finished monument, they saw a piece of themselves rising into the heavens. Their hands had contributed to a structure that promised their own connection to eternity. The pyramid did not elevate only the pharaoh, it elevated the nation. It gave hope that death was not a wall, but a door. Human imagination refuses to accept disappearance. We write stories of afterlife. We speak names of ancestors. We place relics and offerings in graves. We build cemeteries that stretch like cities of memory. The Egyptians perfected this instinct. They envisioned the afterlife in meticulous detail. They mapped it. They explained its geography, its trials, its rewards. They created an entire cosmology in which the dead take their place among the forces that maintain existence. Death became a responsibility, not an end. A king who entered eternity did so to continue ruling with greater power than before. Anthropologists see a universal pattern in the creation of monumental tombs. When a society invests effort into honoring its leaders in death, it is protecting itself from collapse. A leader who dies may leave a vacuum of uncertainty. A tomb fills that void with symbolic permanence. The pyramid ensured continuity. It said that kingship was not an accident of time. It was woven into the structure of the universe. The Egyptians built their pyramids to say that the divine command that appointed the pharaoh would never expire. Psychologists observe that humans cope with fear by creating meaning from what frightens them. Death is the greatest unknown. By giving it structure, by building gateways, by carving instructions into stone, the Egyptians transformed fear into faith. A pyramid is a victory over dread. It says that the greatest threat to identity can be controlled. It says that meaning is stronger than endings. It says that what we build can outlast what we lose. The Egyptians saw the pharaoh as the link between the earthly and the celestial. His pyramid became a fixed bridge between those domains. The living stood in the land of sunlight and harvest. The dead king rose into the land of stars and gods. The connection ensured that both worlds continued in harmony. Without the king acting on behalf of his people from the afterlife, balance could fracture, chaos could awaken. The pyramid therefore protected not only the king's fate, but the fate of everyone who depended on him. Even today, the pyramids of Giza function as gateways of the human imagination. People who stand before them cannot help but wonder what lies beyond their sealed corridors. They feel the pull of mystery. They sense that these stones guard knowledge greater than the passage of time. The very shape of the pyramid suggests ascent, triumph, and continuation. It reaches upward, as if pointing to the answer hidden in the night sky. We continue to build symbolic gateways in the modern world. We erect monuments to leaders and heroes. We create memorials so that names do not disappear. We build museums to defend history from forgetting. We craft spacecraft and telescopes to reach beyond our earthly horizon. Our pyramids may take different forms, but their purpose remains recognizable. We refuse to accept the idea that existence ends without a trace. The pyramids reveal a profound truth about being human. Even when we know that life is fragile, we believe that meaning is strong. Even when we know that death will come, we act as though memory can defeat it, and sometimes we succeed. The Egyptians stood in the desert, faced the inevitability of mortality, and answered with monuments that make the dead unforgettable. They turned fear into architecture. The pyramid is a gateway because the human mind demands a passage through fear into understanding. It stands as a declaration that death cannot erase those who build their lives upon purpose. We look at the pyramids and see the boldness of a people who refuse to accept that the end is the end. And in their refusal we find comfort. If stone can hold memory, perhaps memory can hold us. As long as the pyramids have stood beneath the stars, people have wondered whether their power is more than symbolic. Their form is precise, their chambers mysterious, their alignment with the heavens astoundingly accurate. For some minds, this precision must point towards something otherworldly. Whispered theories arise. Did the pyramids harness unknown energy? Did they mark landing sites for beings who travelled from distant galaxies? Could the ancient Egyptians have understood physics far beyond what we know today? And most dramatically of all, were the pyramids built as literal gateways to other worlds? The desire to uncover hidden technology inside these monuments is understandable. The pyramids inspire awe that can feel supernatural. Their towering presence and silent endurance challenge the imagination. Yet to give credit to forces beyond Earth is to underestimate the genius of the Egyptians. It is to erase their intellect, their faith, and their mastery over stone and sky. The truth is more meaningful than fantasy. The pyramids achieved their purpose not through impossible machinery, but through remarkable human will. There is no evidence that any ancient structure on Earth acted as a portal to another realm of physical existence. No writings describe teleportation, no inscriptions depict interdimensional travel. The Egyptians wrote extensively about the afterlife and the journey of the soul. If they had constructed devices that opened physical gateways, they would have proclaimed such triumph loudly and clearly. Instead, their texts tell a different story. They describe passage through ritual, through spirit, through the enduring power of identity. The gate the Egyptians built does not open for flesh. It opens for essence. Stories of portals often come from misreading symbols, as if they were literal instructions. When a shaft aligns with Orion's belt, some imagine a cosmic beam connecting two distant star systems, a tunnel through which beings might leap across space. But for the Egyptians, Orion represented Osiris, the god of rebirth. The shaft did not function as a highway for bodies. It acted as a guide for the king's bar to rise among the gods. Symbolism is mistaken for science when mystery outpaces understanding. There are claims that the pyramids are power generators that once produced energy using forms we have forgotten. Yet the interior chambers show no trace of equipment or infrastructure that could support such systems. They were sealed sanctuaries, not industrial spaces. Their walls hold no soot or residue from machines. They hold prayers. They hold stars in the form of words and angles. What they generate is memory, not electricity. What they protect is belief, not wires. Pseudo-archaeology thrives on the emptiness of the unknown. It takes the voids discovered inside the Great Pyramid and fills them with speculation rather than patience. It looks at the steep corridors and imagines them as fuel chutes or launch tunnels. It sees the perfect geometric shape and assumes it must have come from beings too advanced to be human. But the Egyptians made their intentions clear. They built vessels for resurrection. They wrote those intentions into hieroglyphs that our own eyes can still read. They demanded that their king survive death through spirit, not through technology disguised as stone. There is comfort in imagining that lost worlds of superior beings once visited our ancestors. It excuses us from believing that a culture without modern machines could accomplish miracles through research, discipline, and devotion. Yet the miracle does not diminish when we acknowledge it as human. It becomes greater. It teaches that the mind guided by belief can achieve what seems impossible. The Egyptians did not wait for help from the sky. They studied the sky and learned how to rise. The myths of actual physical portals also distract from the achievements that truly deserve admiration. The alignment of the pyramids with the cardinal directions required long nights of observation and the ability to apply astronomical knowledge to construction. The precision of the stonework required geometry before geometry was named. The organization required to sustain thousands of workers for many years shows advanced logistics and political unity. Every part of the pyramid reflects intelligence that belongs entirely to Earth. To claim that extraterrestrial forces or hidden sciences built these monuments is to rob the Egyptians of their legacy. It is to rewrite history because the truth seems unbelievable. Yet the truth stands tall, casting a shadow across time. Humans built the pyramids. Humans carved their message into the desert. Humans reached for eternity and caught it. The afterlife described in the pyramid texts and later in the Book of the Dead is a realm beyond the physical state we know, but not a different universe in the scientific sense. It is a spiritual continuation, a journey of consciousness shaped by memory and identity. The pyramid does not create a hole in space-time. It creates a map that the soul follows. It does not distort the laws of physics. It expresses the laws of meaning. Some modern interpretations cling to the idea that if the pyramids cannot be explained easily by modern standards, then they must hide technology far beyond our reach. But difficulty is not proof of impossibility. The pyramids can be explained through tools, physics, mathematics, and devotion. There is no need to search for secret wormholes when the visible world already contains breathtaking feats of thinking and building. The greater myth, the one that deserves reverence, is the myth that shaped Egypt itself, death transformed into victory through knowledge and order. This myth is not fantasy. It is the foundation of Egyptian culture. It built temples, it shaped the calendar, it carved gods into the sky. The pyramids were built because a civilization believed in the future so strongly that it refused to let the present end. When one stands before the Great Pyramid today, the experience feels supernatural, not because it is a portal to another universe, but because it is a portal to a mind that refused to accept limits. The humans who built these monuments lived in a world where every star mattered and every question demanded action. They answered the greatest question of all by building structures that argue against silence. Their message is carved into their work, a message written not in fantasy but in stone. Nothing ends if we choose to continue. The truth is more meaningful than any myth of alien architects or cosmic doors. The pyramids connect human beings to the idea that memory can triumph over time. They reveal that ambition can shape the horizon. They show that a soul can rise through belief and architecture. Their power is not diminished by explaining them. Their power is proven by the fact that we still seek explanation. The pyramids were always gateways, but never to distant planets. They lead to eternity, as the Egyptians understood it, a place where identity endures among the stars. And the greatest transformation they offer is not what they did for the dead, but what they continue to do for the living. They remind us that civilization grows when we build our greatest hopes out of the materials at hand. They remind us that humanity does not need help from beyond the sky to reach the sky. We have already done so. The pyramids rise from the desert with a message that has crossed the ages. They say that humans saw death and refused to accept it as a wall. They say that the people of ancient Egypt believed a soul could take flight and join the stars. They say that architecture can hold memory so tightly that even the sands of time cannot erase it. These monuments are more than stone. They are the voice of a civilization that understood one of the greatest truths of existence. Imagination is stronger than fear. All around the pyramid world, the living carry on with their days. The sun rises, the Nile flows. People laugh, people grieve. But within those towering structures, the king's journey continues in a dimension that is not bound by clocks. His bar still moves.